So, Janice, it is very nice to meet you today, and I would like to ask you some questions on your creative life. And my first question is, as you were born in Assam, in Jorhat, and grew up in Shillong, so how that influenced you as a writer, and how that actually shaped you as a writer, your creative journey?
All right, that's a lovely question. Thank you. So I was born in Jorhat, you're absolutely right, and I grew up in Shillong, but I also grew up in Assam. In my very younger years, I was with my parents, and my dad was in Assam. So I also grew up in Assam, and I had the fortune and the pleasure of being able to grow up in some of the most beautiful places around Assam, in North Lakhimpur, Margarita, Bishwanath Charali, Tezpur, and of course I also had the hills to grow up in. So I'm so fortunate that I have these landscapes in my life, because they have shaped me as a writer in so many ways. My writing is inspired by these landscapes, by the vast plains of Assam, by the vast skies of Assam, but also by the high mountains in Meghalaya. I think the way that both these spaces have shaped me as a writer or a storyteller, though, is that in both these places around Assam, in Shillong, I grew up in a community of storytellers.
Yes.
Here and back in Shillong. And to be surrounded by storytellers, I think, is the greatest gift that a writer can receive, because storytellers teach you how to listen and how to write. So I don't think I would really have become a writer if I wasn't surrounded by storytellers, in these places.
Okay.
They really developed my love for storytelling, and they made me want to tell stories for the rest of my life.
Okay. Then, Janice, actually, you studied in Loreto Convent.
Yes.
Then in Assam Valley School, also in St. Stephen's College. Then abroad. So how that exactly shapes you as a writer, and how that influenced you? Your student life.
Okay, all right. I think this is a very sort of complicated thing to talk about, because for those of us who grew up here in the Northeast, we are often told by our elders, by our parents and grandparents, that you have to get out. You have to go elsewhere to become successful, or you have to, there's nothing here, because there's so much trouble, there's so much political violence and turbulence, that maybe it's better that you get out. And so a lot of us actually migrated for those reasons, thinking that maybe there's not much to come back to. And I think so much of my life and so much of my writing has been to reassess those narratives, to also in some ways remake those narratives, because in my going away from home also lay the return home. That journey can only happen when you have left. And I think that return home, and not just physically in that I am now back in Shillong, but a turning of the gaze. I think your gaze as a writer shifts when you return home in that way. You start thinking about the stories that are closest around you, the stories that you have to unearth, because your history never really taught you the history of what was around you, of the hills, especially for me. So I feel as though in some way my writing has now found its subject, that my gaze has turned in some way back to, the place around me, the place that I was born, the place that I grew up in. But that going away is also very important, because it makes you realize that the world is inexplicably large but also inexplicably connected. That there are people that you can have a conversation with like this, who you think you may not share anything in common with because they are from the other, corner of the globe. And then you realize that you have stories to share and things to learn from them and experiences to, to witness. So for me, both have been important, the going away as well as the return.
Yes. And you are a fiction writer and a poet. And which identity you like most? Poet or
I don't really
writer?
care, to be honest, because I feel as though...
And you are a story writer and novelist. Which genre exactly you like most? Actually,
I don't
that
know.
is difficult to say.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if the I feel like the stories choose you. That as a writer, I step into the energy of a story. I don't want to be presumptuous to say that I write stories. I step into the energy of a story if I am fortunate enough to do so, and then that story is revealed through me in some way. So in that process, there is no or very little consideration of what genre is this and what form is this. I feel as though form is something that you are constantly creating and negotiating. It's not something that you step into because it pre-exists. It's not like a house that already exists and you just step in through the door. I think that form is something that you build, one brick at a time, so that it takes the shape that it needs to. Form is precarious. It is not a given. So because of that, I don't know if I think in terms of, I'm going to write a short story, or I'm going to write a novel, and I'm going to write fiction, non-fiction. I feel as though these boundaries, at least in that part of the process, and even possibly beyond, I don't know if it really matters. I'm interested in entanglements. I'm interested in how messy things are, how beautifully messy things are, and I would love for my writing to kind of be all of the things that it needs to be.
Yes. Okay. Then your journey from boats and land onwards, then in between Seahorse and Nine Chambered, they are so much different from your latest novel that I translated, Everything the Light Touches. So I just want to know how exactly you shifted from those kind of stories to this kind of a complicated work of fiction. So tell me about your research and the process of you writing Everything the Light Touches.
That is such a generous question. Thank you so much. I know that my books look very, very disparate, and in certain ways they really are. In terms of theme, in terms of form. But I feel as though the one thing they really carry in common is this persistent questioning of the idea of categories, and how we as humans are very fond of boxing and labeling and putting things into neat little compartments. We do that with identity, with religion, with gender, with nationality. We like things, we prefer to have things very neat. And life doesn't work that way. Life is much more complicated and messy than that. So each book in some way has been a work that tries to question and resist categorization or the idea of categorization. So for Boats on Land, it's very much asking who is an insider and who is an outsider. Who belongs to a particular place and who has the right to say you belong or you don't belong, right? With Seahorse, it's very much a question of, who decides what gender you are, and it is about queerness and how, gender is a spectrum. It is fluid. So it resists the categorizations that gender provides. With Everything the Light, with Nine Chambered Heart, again, it's a resisting of, who decides who you are. How is identity built? Are we who we tell ourselves we are? Are we the stories that other people tell us? And who gets to decide, right? Which narrative is more valid than the other. So Everything the Light touches, in some ways, is the most tangible and the most persistent resistance that I have offered to the idea of categorization and labels and divisions than all of the other books, because it is, as you know, a questioning of epistemology. How do we know what we know? How do we learn what we learn? And how does the way that we learn about something or someone affect our relationship with that thing or with that person, right? So are we going to learn through division, or are we going to learn through integration and something more relational? Are we going to learn through categorization, or are we going to learn through unity, through bringing things together and recognizing interconnectivity? So Everything the Light touches is very much offering, for us, it's offering that. And I thought that botany might be a way for me to use, to use science as a way to explore how we learn and how we know about the world. So botany offers us that vehicle. It becomes that kind of portal through which this thematic concern is explored. The research process, oh my god, I think I already mentioned that it took about 4 or 5 years. It was a very long process of reading, because I knew nothing about science. I was not ever a science student. I did arts and humanities, so it was about reading up from scratch and really sort of getting to grips with what traditional science looks like in order to be able to then critique it. Does that answer your question mostly?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Continue.
Actually, I want to know how that idea came to your mind to draw a parallel between Goethe's Urflanz and that mythical tree, primal tree that Evelyn is searching for. I would love to know that.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I mean, because of what Everything the Light touches is about, this idea that, if we perhaps begin to learn about the world in a different way, then perhaps we will have a different kind of relationship with the world. And by the world, I also very, very much mean the natural world, right? The natural world around us, of which we are an integral part, obviously. So I needed something that could symbolize that integration. I needed something that could symbolize unity. I needed something that stood or resisted against all kinds of division and categorization. So Goethe's earth plants, which is the primeval plant, the plant that is all plants, seemed to me the most beautiful, the most potent metaphor, the most powerful symbol of this idea that everything is connected, that we cannot live our lives with this kind of division that we enforce on the world around us. And in order to continue that idea, I wanted for Evie to pick up on something that she finds in these, let's just say, slightly fictional and non-fictional books that she's reading, and she picks up on this same idea of this primeval, mythical plant. But it's very important that it is located in an area of the world with indigenous communities, because for me, indigenous ways of being, indigenous ways of looking at the world are something that we must return to if we wish to, claw our way out of this ecological sort of mess that we have created around us. So while Goethe, offers us this idea in the late 1700s, Shai's story, which is the one that envelopes all of the other stories, really brings out Evie's sort of quest in some way, and brings us into the indigenous space, where I say that this idea that Goethe had is an idea that has been with indigenous people for centuries and centuries longer. And it's an idea that is as important as the one that Goethe projects. He's a white European man, and even then he was dismissed. Can you imagine?
Yes.
But so you can imagine what happens to indigenous ideas. Then they are held at a much lower sort of esteem. They are dismissed. But I wished to place them in conversation.
Okay. So Janice, there is another question. Do you like your books to be edited? Do you give your books to editors? There are some writers who actually let their books edited a lot, and there are some who do not like it. What is your perspective on that? Your stand?
I have to admit that I actually really, really enjoy collaborating with an editor who I trust very, very deeply. So it can't just be anyone. It has to be somebody whose opinion I trust, someone I've perhaps worked with before. But I truly enjoy working with an editor, and I've been fortunate enough to work with an editor like that, Rahul Soni, who I feel has a vision for the book that perhaps even I hadn't imagined. And they are pushing me to sort of fulfill a larger vision for the book that I might not even have imagined for myself. So I actually really enjoy the editing process. I think that that's where the book is, elevated in some ways. It's uplifted, it's polished, it's improved. So I have to admit, I actually really enjoy that process.
The last question, Janice. Would you like to say something to the new writers, and what will be your advice to the new writers, the fiction writers and poets of Assam and Northeast as a whole?
Who am I to advise anybody? But I would actually just share a piece of advice that I received, and someone told me that, no one else can tell your story. And I thought that was such a powerful simple but powerful idea that there is no one else who has experienced the things that you have. There is no one else who emerges from your context in the way that you have. And so no one else can tell the story that you do in the way that you do. And I thought that was so bolstering and so strengthening, because it gives you faith in what you have to say.
Okay. Thank you so much,
You're
Janice.
most welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.